afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Sharon Van Sickle-Robbins, president of City Club, and I would like to welcome you all, those of you here at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB or KBPS radio, or watching on Portland Community Media's CityNet 30. Thank you for joining City Club on this Friday, January 7th, for the first Friday Forum of 2011. In consideration of those sitting close to you and those in our radio and television audiences, if everyone could please make sure your cell phones are silenced. Today we will hear from Oregon's Secretary of State, Kate Brown, about redistricting, modernizing voting systems, and more. But first, some announcements. I'd like to start by recognizing our new City Club members. We have a passel of them here today. Elizabeth Ballard from the Oregon Department of Justice, Christine Reynolds from Oric, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, John Hutzler, Washington County Auditor, and Terry Armington of Monikers Snap Names. If you could all stand up, and we'd like to welcome you. I'd like to also thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine, and I'd like to offer our appreciation to the Friday Forum corporate sponsors whose generous financial support make these City Club forums possible. We're extremely pleased to have as winter quarter sponsors Stoll Reeves, The Standard, and West Coast Bank. Please join me in offering them our appreciation. If your company or firm would like to be a City Club sponsor, please contact City Club staff at the back of the room or call the City Club office. In addition to our Friday forums, City Club hosts many interactive and small group events. In January, our Agora event committee will be hosting a wide variety of programs that will include a discussion about the Portland Plan, a panel on what healthcare in Oregon might look like in the coming years, and an intimate talk with author Charles Haing about his most recent book, Brew to Bikes, Portland's Artisan Economy. You can learn more about these events and more on our website, pdxcityclub.org. This spring, City Club will be offering a series titled From Crisis to Opportunity, Exploring Solutions to Oregon's Fiscal Challenges. Each of City Club's 3 event planning committees will offer a wide variety of thought-provoking programs that will examine innovative and long-term solutions to Oregon's fiscal crisis. If you're concerned about the state's economic health and would like to get involved in creating these programs, please see Amy at the back of the room. She's waving. We look forward to seeing you at our Economic Health Series in the spring. And finally, as today's speaker will no doubt make clear, the redistricting process in Oregon and throughout the nation has often been fraught with controversy. City Club is currently seeking volunteers for a new study committee charged with exploring potential alternatives to Oregon's current system for redrawing legislative districts. If you'd like to apply to serve on the committee, and if you haven't served on one before, it's a really great experience. Please speak with the club's Research and Policy Director, Tony Yaccarino, at the back of the room, and he will provide you with a brief application, which is due this coming Monday. And now to our program. City Club is pleased to welcome Oregon Secretary of State Kate Brown. She will share her thoughts on whether the legislature will, at long last, successfully fulfill its constitutional redistricting obligations in 2011. This is something it has not succeeded in accomplishing throughout most of the 20th century, and the task has instead fallen to the office of the Secretary of State. She will also articulate her larger vision and agenda for her office, and will describe Oregon's election process and why it should be a model for other states. Kate began her career when she was appointed to the Oregon House of Representatives in 1991. In 1996, after being elected to 2 more House terms, she won a seat in the Oregon Senate. She was elected Senate Democratic leader 2 years later, and in 2004 became the first woman to serve as Oregon's Senate Majority Leader. In 2008, she was elected Oregon's 24th Secretary of State, and subsequently was appointed by Governor Kulongoski to chair the Oregon Sustainability Board. And now please help me welcome Oregon Secretary of State Kate Brown.
Thanks, Sharon, for your warm welcome, and thanks to the City Club for having me here today. The last time I was here was during my 2008 campaign for Secretary of State, and I shared the stage with my other Democratic opponents. I'm hoping that today's going to be a lot more fun, at least for me. And then I was trying to promise about why I was so nervous in coming to the City Club, and we've spent a lot of time preparing for today. And I finally hit upon it. A couple of weeks ago, the Oregonian put out an article about the 3 things you should do for your brain, and I actually want to add the 4th thing. The first one is to meditate. The second was to exercise. The third was to do video games. I don't know how many people in this room are doing video games, but I would add to the list, attend City Club Forum regularly or listen to the program at 7 p.m. every night, Channel 8. When Judge Wyatt extended the invitation for me to speak, she asked me to speak about vote by mail, why it took so long to count the ballots in Multnomah County, recounts, and my role, if any, in redistricting. And I thought those would all be great things to talk to you about, but I do a lot more than oversee elections, and I owe it to my staff and to you to share some of the wonderful things that your Secretary of State's office is doing in Salem. The way I see it, I'm a 3 for the price of 1 elected official. Our neighbor to the north, the state of Washington, they elect a lieutenant governor, a Secretary of State, my good friend Sam Reed, and they elect a state auditor. I do all 3 of those jobs for less than the price than one of them. I think that makes me a pretty good bargain for Oregonians. It also means, however, my office has to take on a lot of challenges in diverse policy areas. For the record, I oversee 4 external divisions: audits, archives, corporation, and elections. And I also oversee 3 internal ones as well: Business Services Division, our Information Systems Division, and Human Resources. But what I really see about my major role is encouraging innovation and fostering intelligent risk-taking. And so what I'd like to talk to you about this afternoon is a vision we've created for the agency during my first 2 years in office, which is to innovate for the future, deliver more efficient results, and engage more Oregonians. My plan is to share some of the wonderful work that is happening at corporation, archives, elections, and audits. And then I will close with a discussion you've all been waiting for, redistricting. And of course, I'll leave some time for those famous City Club questions. One of the reasons I'm so honored to work with the employees at this office is I see us as a petri dish, a place for the birth of new ideas and their development. Creativity and innovation are not new at your Secretary of State. You might be surprised to learn that the Archives Division, the manager of state records, was the first agency in the world to have its historical holdings online. We now have more documents online than any other agency in the state of Oregon. It's really important to me that I support a culture of risk-taking and innovation for a couple of reasons. First of all, I want us to be a model, not only for other agencies in the state, but for the nation. The other reason I'm committed to fostering innovation and delivering results is because of the deficit Oregon is facing. The way I see it, we either need to dramatically reduce the services we provide to Oregonians, or we need to figure out how to do it differently. And honestly, it's probably going to take a little of both. We can't tax our way out of this deficit, and we certainly can't cut our way out of it. With innovation and creativity, we can figure out how to deliver services at less cost. And by improving processes, we can wring more out of every single taxpayer dollar that you give us. Well, you might not think of state government as being risk-taking or innovative. At this point in time, we have no choice. Some of you may have heard David Osborne speak in Oregon a few weeks ago. He mentioned we can't keep beating the same dead horse. As a horsewoman, I probably shouldn't use that metaphor, but it's really, really true. Let me illustrate this for you with another example from our Archives division. While you might not think of archives as creative or sexy, actually this division is all of the above. Before I came on board, we were paying for photos to be used for our Oregon Blue Book, which is our almanac for the state of Oregon. These photos were expensive. So when one of our archivists volunteered to take photos as he traveled to every single one of Oregon's 36 counties checking records, we jumped at the opportunity. Not knowing what we would get back, this longtime archives employee turned out to be a superb photographer. I've seen the photos, and their quality is stunning. So good, in fact, the Archives Division is able to sell them to other state agencies and use the funds to help reduce the cost of producing your Oregon Blue Book. This is a great example of what I mean by innovation, how we are empowering our employees to work smart and be creative, using no expensive consultants, no new equipment, no new hires, just solid in-house creative problem solving. In another of my divisions, the corporation, working with our Information Systems Division, our employees have been both creative and innovative to make it as easy as possible to start a new business in Oregon and create jobs. Over 30 years ago, Governor Vic Atiyeh envisioned a day when a business could get all the permits it needed in one place at the same time. Our central business registry does just that. It enables anyone to start a business in Oregon and register with the Corporation Division, the Oregon Department of Revenue, and the Employment Department at one place at the same time. The best news is we aren't done yet. By the end of my first term, we hope to have a system in place totally connected to your local governments as well. So you could truly get all the permits you need to start a business online at one site. It's pretty amazing, and it was developed in-house. It took a little bit of technology. Actually, it took a lot of technology and a lot of patience to implement. But by the end of my first term, we will finally be able to realize Governor Vic Atiyeh's vision of one-stop shopping for Oregon businesses. By streamlining these processes over the last decade, we've been able to reduce the number of employees in the Corporation Division from 60 to 30, while offering an even better product to our customers. Building on these successes, we're going to continue to innovate while working with the business community to make sure that we are meeting their needs. Again, no expensive consultants, no new equipment, well, maybe a little bit of new technology, no new hires, just solid in-house creative problem solving. I've touched briefly on how we're using innovation and creativity to provide a better product to Oregonians at Archives and at Corporation. Let me move next to the audits, where we're working to deliver better results to Oregonians. In these tough economic times, we're trying to squeeze everything we can out of every single taxpayer dollar. Auditing can play a crucial role. A few moments ago, I mentioned that we can't tax our way. I knew I was going to have trouble with this one. We can't cut our way out, and we can't tax our way out of this deficit. But we can work to figure out how to deliver services more effectively and more efficiently to Oregonians. Historically, Oregon has done a great job with our fiscal audits, or what I call show me the money audits. Where we've lagged behind is in performance auditing, or what I call show me the results audits. In performance auditing, we question, we challenge, we compare, we make recommendations, and most importantly, we follow up. The job of our audits division is to offer state agencies concrete recommendations on how to do things more effectively and more efficiently. In a way, audits provides a roadmap for state agencies to find their way to peak performance. In order to get this done, one of my first moves was to steal Gary Blackmer from the metro area to become the Oregon Director of Audits. It was a major victory for the state, as he is a nationally recognized performance auditor. Under our leadership, we have focused on alligators, not mosquitoes, focusing our work on programs that have large amounts of general fund dollars. We have also reduced the amount of time on each audit and the number of auditors on each audit, so our division is substantially more efficient. Just to illustrate, we have historically advertised that every dollar spent on performance audits returns $8 in cost savings. After looking at our 2010 numbers, that number has increased to $64. Now that is a real return on your investment in performance auditing. And the good news is we're seeing results in terms of programs as well. A good example occurred this last June. Our auditors released an audit which looked at the state effectiveness in collecting child support, and I'm glad to see there's some folks from the Department of Justice here. This subject is really near and dear to my heart. As a young lawyer, I was so frustrated by the inability of parents to collect child support from the deadbeat parents. I know that since I was a young lawyer, the laws have changed substantially. Still, in 2008, the state collected just 62% of the child support due. Okay, you guys, 62%, that's a D-. Our audits team found room for substantial improvement and made recommendations to your Department of Justice. The good news is the Department of Justice is seeking legislative approval for the tools they need to increase child support collection. For the sake of Oregon's children, I'm hoping that within 2 years, we'll see an 80% collection rate, or at least a B, on our way to an A. Oregon's children deserve no less. And while we historically see great compliance with our audit recommendations, we're going back to these state agencies for what we call follow-up audits to ensure that they are following the roadmap that we've laid out for them. This is just one example of the critical work we're doing in your audits division. And while these audits alone can't solve the $3.5 billion deficit, every process improvement we make will enable us to get more bang out of every taxpayer dollar you give us. I would absolutely love to come speak to you about some more innovations that we've planned for auditing in Oregon. Okay, at this point in time, you've heard about my overachievers at archives, my crafty staff at corporations, and my amazing auditing team. Now I'll introduce you to elections, and then yes, I'll get to redistricting. During the last round of cuts, the elections division took a hit, and with another round of cuts looming, I fear more reductions are inevitable. Elections are a critical part of our democratic infrastructure. However, we often take for granted the talented individuals involved in administering this sacred ritual. You might be surprised to learn that we only have 16 people full-time at the state working on elections. Yep, you heard me right. 16 full-time staff doing this work at the state government level. Just to compare, our neighbor to the north, the state of Washington, they have at least 30. Our challenge is how to continue to provide the excellent service at a reduced cost to taxpayers. One way to finding solutions is through what I call intelligent risk-taking. Sometimes taking a risk, even an intelligent one, can be really scary. What I mean by intelligent risk is taking risks where the upside is virtually unlimited and the potential, the downside, is fixed or limited. In state government, I think you all know, we're rarely rewarded when we succeed, but often lambasted when we fail. I think it's really important to foster a culture that says it's okay to take intelligent risks. We can do that by implementing programs incrementally, like we did with the Central Business Registry, and test each phase, or we can take a common sense approach like we've done in the Elections Division. In the past, our elections employees with a legal question would call the Department of Justice for advice. We're billed for every single minute of advice, and it costs us a ton of money. Those of you lawyers in the room, I think you know what I'm talking about. It's billable hours. Yet, in most cases, these employers were already sure of the answer. So after consulting with our employees and asking for their ideas on how we can cut back on legal costs, we realized that our elections employees are the experts. Our legal fees for the last biennium were cut $100,000 a year simply by telling our elections experts that if they are 99% sure of the answer, to trust their instincts and go with their gut. The good news is lawsuits haven't increased and we're saving a lot of money. That's what I call a very lucrative, intelligent risk. And again, I want to emphasize no expensive consultants, no new equipment, no new hires, just solid, in-house, creative problem solving. I think you all know this is not the first time that Oregon elections have been both innovative and creative. As most of you know, Oregon is still the only state in the nation that is entirely vote by mail. Oregonians love vote by mail. I know this because we have some of the highest voter turnout in the nation amongst registered voters. I think our turnout is so high because our system is so convenient and so accessible. It also happens to be cheaper than the traditional polling places, costing about 30% less. Vote by mail is also secure. I'm repeatedly asked, continually asked, why it took so long for Multnomah County to process the 91,000 ballots dropped off, including Lynn Thompson's, on the final day. The short answer is security and accuracy, but the long answer will entail me giving you a basic rundown of the steps involved prior to a ballot being counted. Okay, you guys, all the ballots have barcodes, and once they're arrived at the elections office, the staff sort them, and then they wand every single one of those barcodes by hand to verify that it belongs to the voter. Then the staff use the Oregon Centralized Voter Registration Database to compare each signature on the ballot to the voter registration card. When they don't match, the voters are then contacted by letter or by phone. The people who do the signature verification receive training by the same people who train the forensic specialists at our Oregon State Police. I know each signature is scrutinized. A few years ago, I got a call back from my elections clerk saying my signature didn't match, and I needed to come down to the office and verify that I was indeed Kate Brown and that the signature belonged to me. You can probably imagine the clerk's surprise when I walked in to verify my identity. But that's the good news. I know that every single signature is checked, even mine. So after the signatures are checked, the ballots go to an elections board. Is there anyone here who's served on an elections board before? Okay, got a few folks. Fred, okay, of course you did. An elections board is a group of people that open and process the ballots before they go to the banner to be before they go to the scanner to be counted. They are really dedicated men and women who do these issues day after day, manual work, little pay year after year. We couldn't function without these men and women, and they're truly my heroes. It's required by statute that the elections board be comprised of at least 2 different people from different parties. If someone leaves to go to the bathroom or get a Coke, they stop. This is true in every single county in Oregon and every single board. The reason why it took so long for the 91,000 ballots to be counted, in Multnomah County, I might add, is that every one of them needed to be wanded in, have their signatures verified, and allow for the elections board to review every single ballot before they go to the machines to be counted. Overall, I'm confident that our vote-by-mail system is still incredibly quick at delivering results. And even more importantly, it's accurate. I think most of you know I'm no stranger to recounts, particularly at this point in time. I was involved in one myself. I won my first primary race by literally 7 votes. This year, we had a couple of Senate races that were extremely close, with a difference of less than 300 votes. In Oregon, if the top 2 candidates are less than 1/5 of 1% apart, the statute requires an automatic recount. However, the candidate or the campaign can choose to pay for a full or partial recount, just like the Republicans did in Jackson County's Senate District 3, or the Democrats did in Clackamas County's Senate District 20. These recounts dispel any remaining doubts about the accuracy of Oregon's vote-by-mail system. You should know that the recount results of these races were almost exactly the same as the original results. In Clackamas County, the results were 100% identical. In Jackson County, the vote was 7 votes off, interestingly enough. Considering they counted more than 50,000 ballots, only 7 votes off equals a 40/100% discrepancy. And we're in the process of examining what happened with those ballots to make sure that it doesn't happen the next time around. If you have any doubts about our vote-by-mail system, I really encourage you to come take a look for yourself. You can come to the elections process, come to the clerk's office in person to see what's happening, and many choose to do this last election cycle. Good news is, because of our vote-by-mail system, we have a paper trail. So it's an incredibly transparent process, and you can physically watch the ballots being counted. It gives me an added sense of security and confidence in our system, and I think it should give you one as well. So I really encourage you to go visit your local county clerk's office when there's an election happening. Despite the level of security and transparency, I know that vote-by-mail has its critics. Some people even see vote-by-mail as a Democratic plot to steal elections. I think that the Honorable Norma Paulus would be quite upset to hear that. She was the prominent Republican who actually instituted the vote-by-mail statute that allowed local elections to happen as early as 1981. It was really Norma Paulus's vision that Secretary Kiesling implemented via the initiative process that got us where we are today. As I mentioned, part of my vision is to engage more Oregonians. And unfortunately, we lag behind the rest of the country in voter registration. And that's why I was so thrilled when Representative Ben Cannon introduced an online voter registration bill during the 2009 legislative session. When that bill passed, we were able to implement our online voter registration system as of March 1st, 2010. The system is simple, accessible, and incredibly secure. Now, as a result of that bill, any citizen with a driver's license, a state ID card, or a permit, basically you need to have a signature on file at the DMV, is able to use your online registration system. It isn't meant to replace paper registration, but it provides another convenient option. Most importantly, it removes a barrier for people to participate in the political process. The truth is, we know that if we can get people registered, they are more likely to vote. With vote by mail, Oregon's turnout amongst registered voters has consistently been in the top 10 in the nation after the last 3 election cycles. For example, in our last presidential, Oregon's voter turnout was 85.7%. Now that's outstanding. Our online registration system is also incredibly cost-effective. A recent Pew study says we spent $8 million to register voters during the 2008 election cycle. $8 million for voter registration. Under our current system, the paper system costs about $4 per voter. With the online system, we're spending less than $1 per registered voter. That's a 75% savings for the taxpayer, and in real dollars, that's a $6 million savings. That's the culture change and in dollars and cents that we're trying to bring to you. Well, as spectacular as I find Oregon's vote-by-mail system, we are always looking at ways to improve the voting experience through innovation. Starting with the last election in November, by going to OregonVotes.org, and you have the decal on your table, you can click on My Vote, the My Vote button, and you can track your ballot online through our ballot tracker application. Other new functions include you can change your registration information, you can find a drop site, and you can find answers to frequently asked questions. But our elections innovation doesn't stop there. I know money is tight, but by making elections priority, we are able to make the most of what we have. That starts with what I call modernization of our voter registration system. The paradigm of the 20th century was that it was incumbent upon citizens to register to vote. The new paradigm of the 21st century is that the government contacts you as a result of you using government services. Instead of spending time registering voters, organizations like the League of Women Voters or the Bus Project, these organizations can spend their valuable time and energy working to engage and educate voters. And I should have said the Oregon League of Minority Voters as well, right? That's a paradigm shift. And by embracing such a shift, I'm reflecting my opinion that voting is a right and not a privilege. And when we look at voting this way, it makes sense that the onus should be on the state to provide unfettered access to the ballot for all of its eligible citizens. Between participating in a Pew Charitable Trust pilot program to get voter registration modernization off the ground and using some of our remaining Help America Vote Act dollars, we hope to have parts of a system in place in time for the 2012 election, which unfortunately is just around the corner. Now that you know a little bit more about elections, it's time to talk about the R word, redistricting. Just to give you some basic information, Oregon goes through redistricting every 10 years, just after the Census Bureau releases the data from its population count. With the census numbers in hand, the legislature is charged with redrawing the legislative plan and the congressional plan. If either of these plans fails or is vetoed by the governor, responsibility is then delegated. The legislative plan comes to my office, while the congressional plan goes to the Oregon courts. ORS 188 sets forth the statutory criteria for drawing district lines, and they include that the boundaries shall be contiguous and use existing and geographic political boundaries. In addition, no district shall be drawn to favor any political party or incumbent legislator, or should not be drawn for the purpose of diluting the voting strength of minority populations. And while all of these criteria is significant, the main purpose of redistricting is to equalize the populations of the district. The last time we went through redistricting, in 2001, I happened to be the caucus leader. So I went to the Senate president, who happened to be a Republican, and asked him to create a bipartisan committee to draw the district lines. The reason I did so was because I believe that there must be a level playing field, that the process must be fair. That's the same philosophy that will guide me as your Secretary of State. For the record, and not too surprisingly, he refused. If the legislature is unable to pass a legislative redistricting plan this time around, I want everyone in this room and all Oregonians to know and be absolutely confident that I will use my wealth of experience and my incredibly talented staff to produce a plan which will be representative of the entire state. My commitment to Oregonians, above all, is to provide a fair and transparent process. My first priority will be to establish a nonpartisan advisory group to assist me in bringing in as many voices as I can. While I'm accountable to the voters, I still see an advisory group as a valuable check and balance as I navigate through the process. Secondly, I'll hit the road, like I want to do, to hear from folks around the state. I know I can't reach everyone, but I will most definitely put the effort in. As we're crafting a plan, we need to include diverse perspectives from all over Oregon. The perspectives of folks like my good friend Stan Timmerman, a wheat farmer in Pendleton, or Salome Chimuku, my former HAVA intern and current Willamette student. But we're not there yet. The ball will start in the legislature's court, and I know that Senator Bonamici's here, and she's chairing the Senate committee. We did lots of research and have discovered something pretty interesting. The 2011 legislature has a unique opportunity to be the first legislature in Oregon's modern history to pass a fully implemented redistricting plan. In both 61 and 81, plans were passed by the legislature, approved by the governor, but ended up in the courts, and parts of each were overturned. The Secretary of State was then called upon to fix those sections before the plan could be put into effect. In 71 and 91, the legislature was unable to enact a redistricting plan. And in that 2001 session that I talked about, we passed both legislative and congressional plans. I think I voted no at the time. The governor vetoed those plans, and the legislative plan was left for Secretary Bradbury to draw. As we enter the session next week, the legislature is in a virtual 50-50 split. Bipartisan will not be a luxury this session. It will be a necessity. This presents the legislature with a historic opportunity to use this split to its advantage and draw up a plan that can work for both sides. By working on a bipartisan basis, I think Oregonians will have more confidence that there's a fair process because both of the major parties will have an equal voice. With this in mind, I think Oregonians will agree with me that I think it makes a lot of sense for the legislature to do redistricting. And there are a couple more reasons behind my thinking. First of all, the legislature is going to have more time. Well, I am well aware of the huge tasks they have before them this session. They convene officially on Monday of next week, but starting in February full-time, and they have until June 30th. This gives them about 3 to 4 months, depending upon when the census releases the data, to complete the redistricting plan. By comparison, I have from basically July 1st to August 15th, about 6 weeks. And even though I've visited all of Oregon's 36 counties many times, there's no doubt in my mind that legislators know their districts better than anyone else. Simply put, they have a history there, they've campaigned there, and they live there. At least most of them do. I'm kidding, you guys. Really, I am kidding. For example, and let me give you an example of this. Under the last redistricting plan, John Day and Canyon City have 2 different House members. For those of you who haven't been there, these are virtually twin cities. That's the kind of communities of interest that I may not be aware of and in drawing an entire plan. Another advantage to the legislature drawing a plan is it provides an opportunity to bring more perspectives to the table. I'm a true believer that the best policies are made when we have a diversity of folks making decisions. Finally, I think everyone in this room knows my good friend, Senate President Peter Courtney. I would say that this is probably one of the greatest challenges of his whole career, and I'm confident that he's going to tackle this one head on. Having said all that, I certainly realize that after 17 years, there's no way anyone can predict what the legislature will do. And I truly know that this will be the toughest session that this legislature will ever have, probably the toughest in the history of the state. And I, of all people, understand the difficult choices that they will need to make in terms of the budget. I want to reiterate, if they are unable to pass a redistricting plan, you all should be absolutely confident that my experience, my dedicated staff, and my guiding values will help me draw up a plan which will be fair and transparent and good for all of Oregon. I am running out of time. I wanted just to say thank you for the opportunity to spend time with you this afternoon, sharing my vision as your Secretary of State, as we work to innovate, deliver better results for Oregonians, and engage more folks across the state in our work at archives, audits, corporation, and elections. It's truly been a pleasure to share some of our successes in being creative and innovating and risk-taking. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing your City Club questions. Thank you.
The first question for our speaker, as always, will be from our Friday Forum host. Our host today is City Club Governor Promise King. Promise is the executive director of the Oregon League of Minority Voters and also wrote on race and politics as a columnist for the Portland Tribune. He has been a City Club member since 2008. Promise?
Again, I want to welcome Secretary of State to the City Club. When I was asked to ask questions, they said, make it hardball. But I told the guy I'm not Chris Matthew. Secretary of State, given the landscape in Salem, given that we have this balance of powers in legislatures, given the past struggles and the bickering and partisan gridlocks, I hear you saying you're going to create a non-partisan group if the legislature refuses to do right by Oregonians with regards to redistricting. Can you tell us a little bit about that non-partisan group that you intend to form? The idea and the concept and solutions. Thanks.
Thanks, Promise, and I really appreciate the question. I came up with this idea as I was looking at redistricting over the last couple of decades and wanting Oregonians to have full faith and confidence in the results of the redistricting plan crafted by the Secretary of State. And as we look around the country in terms of what other states have done, commissions, there's some interesting models. Iowa State has a very interesting model. They essentially use staff. California is undergoing a very interesting proposal passed by initiative recently, and I'm very intrigued about how that's going to work out. But I think there's a couple of things that we want to keep in mind, and some of them I mentioned. Number one is accountability. I remain accountable to the voters, and I think that's a very important criteria. And I think that's really important with the legislature as well, as they're directly accountable to the voters as well. Secondly, transparency. I think both the legislature as well as my office are very used to working in an open government environment. I think Oregonians want to be able to watch the redistricting process happen as it's going on. And then also being able to bring as many forces to the table as possible. And in doing that, that's where I came up with the idea of a panel to advise me as a check and balance. I don't know who these folks are going to be yet, but I think it would comprise a cross-section of Oregon, both political parties and also including folks from the minority party, as well as folks from across the state. And hopefully we'll have some young people on the panel as well. Unfortunately, I don't have the resources to offer any type of salary, so it'll be a total volunteer role. So that's what we're looking at this point in time. Thank you.
We're now going to take questions from the floor. Asking questions at Friday Forums is a privilege of City Club membership. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. If I flash this question mark card, it means we're waiting for your question. Thank you.
I'm like, what happens if you flash the question mark card at me? Okay. All right.
Secretary Brown, I'm Edward Hershey. I'm a City Club member. In other states, bipartisan efforts of the sort you have described have sometimes come to be called incumbency preservation acts, with the creation of more and more safe, non-competitive districts to the detriment of the democratic process. How would you encourage your erstwhile colleagues in the legislature to avoid that?
That's a great question, and I love my colleagues, just to make that very clear. I have to tell you that There are a number of factors that determine whether incumbents get reelected or not. And if we look at the current redistricting plan that we're operating under that Bill Bradbury crafted, you see the legislature in a virtual tie. Your House is 30-30 and your Senate is 16-14. I think one can argue about the underlying plan, but I think that is telling that circumstances with the political times or the economy or whatever was happening across the country really impact the plan as well. So in terms of what I would say to my colleagues, these are professionals, at least in the Senate. A number of them have been working together for a number of years. I'm confident that they will put aside political differences and work to craft a plan that's good for Oregon. I have confidence in that.
Nick Orphanakis, City Club member. My question is on the reproducibility of the electronic count. This is the first time that I've ever heard numbers actually applied to that. In my own field, we have a process of checking reproducibility, and I can tell you that 100% expectation is almost unrealistic. So my question to you is, have you got procedures in place, and do you use procedures that check the people, the machines, the process every day that this takes place, and eliminate people or machines or processes that may not be functioning within the specified limits that you would accept? And I think it would be good to know that number, and then maybe you could tell us when that count should be redone a little more accurately.
Thanks. Reproducibility, I thought we were going back to redistricting, but we're actually back to the other R word, and that's recounts, right? Okay, so let me tell you the security measures that are in place before and after the election with every single election cycle. First of all, your county clerks run what we call logic and accuracy tests before the election with sample ballots. They do the same thing after every single election to verify the outcome. The other thing we do is in 2007, we passed legislation requiring, it's not technically an audit, and I shouldn't probably use that word, but we require recounts in 3 statewide elections in every single county in the state of Oregon. That's how, those are some of the criteria that some of the processes we use to reproduce the outcomes. I will tell you that for the most part, the OptiScan machines that we use are more accurate than the hand counts that we do after the election. In recounts, like I said, in Clackamas County, it was 100% accurate. I think there was a recount done in the governor's race in Multnomah County. The chair of the Republican Party, Bob Tiernan, characterized it as brutally accurate. It was 100% accurate. So those are all done by hand, the recounts, and help to verify the outcome.
Virginia Cornyn, City Club member. The census is a snapshot in time and certainly is the basis for redistricting, but is there a way of including trends? Because the trends of growth for a number of minority populations in Oregon, I believe, need to be factored in as we live with redistricting for 10 years. Is that a possibility, and does that also then become an encouragement for those minority populations to register and become involved in the political process?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. Let me talk about trends more generally in terms of redistricting. I say there's sort of 3 time frames in redistricting. There's the time from the beginning of the country up until 1962, 1964, when we saw 3 critical U.S. Supreme Court cases determining allowing the federal courts to be involved in the discussion about redistricting at the federal level, number 1, and number 2, clarifying 1 person, 1 vote. So what happened across the nation was a smattering of redistricting as a result of census. Some states, they didn't actually do it. You had legislative districts where a member had, very few members and very few folks in his district, and you had other members with numbers of folks. So that would be one time frame. The second time frame is between now, 1962, 64, and now. and a lot of litigation regarding the census and what happened around the country, what level of deviation is allowed in terms of the population per district and what is not. I would submit to you that the third sort of era is starting now. And in talking to staff about redistricting, we are in a new era, and that is because essentially each and every one of us can have access to the software to draw a legislative or a congressional plan. So Ron Cease, if he wants to sit down in his home and craft a legislative plan and put it out there, he can. So, and he says no, okay. So he says no. So that's sort of the trend that I see happening. I think the other interesting part about the census and redistricting is that I guess if I were encouraging folks, I would be encouraging the counting to happen at the census level. It's based on population. And while in Oregon we do a pretty damn good job of getting our population counted, I think we can do a better job. We fell short of a congressional district, an additional congressional district, by about 40,000 folks. If we had scurried and making sure we gotten everyone counted that actually lives in this state, I would venture to guess that we could have gotten an additional congressional seat. Washington ended up getting that seat in the Northwest. So, thank you.
Corey Allen, City Club member. On the unsexy topic of audits, I was curious, Oregonians are famous for taking care of the environment and the community, and we're in a fiscal crisis and we may focus on the financial aspects of the effectiveness of a department. Could you talk about kind of the long-range values and how your audits may reflect those values as well?
That's a great question. As I mentioned earlier, we're working really hard to get more value out of every performance audit that we do. We've reduced the amount of time that every auditor spends on an audit. We've reduced the number of audits. But most importantly, we've been focusing on what I call alligators and not mosquitoes. We've been focusing on audits that involve general fund dollars that can have a larger impact to the state. You should know the couple of the audits that are coming up that are on the list, not for certain. We are in the process of doing an audit on sustainability and state government, and we are in the process of doing an audit on the Department of Human Services foster care system. So those are a couple of the audits. In the works right now, we're doing an audit on the Oregon University system and faculty productivity, and we're also in the midst of the Department of Energy audit. So, I could go on a lot more.
Debbie Lynn Molyneux, City Club member. And back to redistricting for a moment. When you mentioned the R word, yes. When you mentioned setting up the nonpartisan panel for redistricting, should it come to your office, one of the things that I've noted lately is that a lot of the new registrations for voters, the fastest growing party is actually a non-party with independent voters. How do you take that into consideration, and what is the percentage of voters right now that are independent?
That's a great question. In terms of an advisory panel that I would have, I would make sure that there's a percentage of representation on the panel that are either what I call non-affiliated, not affiliated with a particular party, or representation from minority parties. I think that's the challenge for the legislature, frankly, given the percentage, 20% to 25% around the state of either unaffiliated voters or voters affiliated with minor parties, is how to get those folks at the table, since they don't have any membership represented at the state legislature. That's why hearings are so important. I know that the legislature will have hearings, and if I'm tasked with drawing the legislative plan, I will have hearings around the state as well. So one, for me, it's having minority party representation and non-affiliated voter representation on that panel, but it's also hearing from Oregonians, independents, Green parties, constitutional parties, libertarians, as we have a plan out there and get their input. So it's both.
My question is kind of follows on that, and maybe it's answered in your frequently asked questions. But if you're a minority person or party, how do you qualify to get identified as such in the voting process? In other words, if you're, let's say, a Tea Party or a Green Party, how do you get that onto the ballot?
That's a great question. It requires a number of signatures, and yes, a number of signatures, and I can't remember off the top of my head what that is, so yes.
John Hutzler, City Club member as of today, and Washington County Auditor, since you were kind enough to swear me in earlier this week. Thank you.
Congratulations, John.
So returning to audits, I am, as I know you are, a great supporter of performance audit, and I'm wondering, in these difficult economic times, many state agencies may be considering cutting back on their internal audit functions. Several years ago, the Audits Division was instrumental in promoting audit within the agencies by conducting an audit to determine whether agencies were in compliance with state legislation requiring an internal audit function. I'm wondering whether you might be considering a follow-up on that audit to be sure that internal audit resources aren't cut in difficult times.
I know that Gary's working very hard with his counterparts at the local level to make sure that we are not doing redundant audits, and that we are working to sort of step in where we can. For example, we did an audit of the Willamette ESD Education Service District in the Mid-Willamette Valley a few months ago to identify some issues with business practices that were and mismanagement that were happening there. We are going to go back in and do a follow-up audit on that Willamette ESD in the spring of this year. So the answer is yes. I think we need to collaborate and partner more, and I look forward to working with you in your new role as the Washington County Auditor. Congratulations, John.
Chris Andre, City Club member, KBOO programmer. I just have one brief question for you. Do you write English or Western? I write English. I think all Oregonians should ride.
Well, pretty funny. I grew up in the Midwest riding Western, and I came out here, and now I'm riding dressage. So.
Ah, very good. And safe, safer than jumping.
No going over jumps. I don't want to lose what brains I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think, all right.
We have time actually for one more question, and I'm going to ask it. I was just wondering about having people register to vote at the DMV when they're getting their licenses, and what kind of issues obstruct our ability to do that?
She wanted to know what we're doing to work with the Department of Motor Vehicles to make sure we're in compliance with the National Voting Registration Act of, I think it's 1993. Did I get that right? 95, 93. In any event, we had the opportunity, my elections divisions director and I, to tour the Delaware system and see what they're doing in Delaware. They essentially have a seamless system to allow for complete compliance with the act. And basically what you do is you go into a Department of Motor Vehicles office, you're going to go get your driver's license renewed or whatever it is you're doing. Before you can do that with the particular clerk, you have to go through the process of either updating your voter registration, changing your party, making your addresses correct, or you have to sign on an electronic signature pad that we all sign when we go to Fred Meyer's or whatever. And essentially, you could not update your Department of Motor Vehicles information until you go through the electronic process on your own of updating your voter registration information or declining to do that, in which case you sign. So we are working with the Department of Motor Vehicles. We have a meeting with them in a few weeks to see what we can do to partner with them to implement what we call the e-sig, electronic signature processes, at all of your Department of Motor Vehicles offices. So essentially it'll be a seamless system. The next time you move, you update your voter registration, your driver's license information, you can do your voter registration all in essentially one-stop shopping, to bring us back to our corporation division. So thank you. We have
have run out of time. We're going to stop for today. Join us next week to hear from Oregon State economist Tom Potowski about whether Oregon's economic glass is half empty or half full. As we close, please join me again in expressing our appreciation to today's guest, Kate Brown. We're adjourned.